Almost everyone who is painting or drawing portraits is familiar with the name of John Singer Sargent. And if for some reason you're not familiar with him, just Google his name and look at his paintings. Like, you will understand why he is arguably called one of the greatest to ever do it. And any one of his paintings that you get to see, if it's a really high quality, I suggest that you just zoom all the way in and then you kind of zoom out. You will notice that the paintings, they don't really make sense up close, so you're just going to see a bunch of brush strokes. And let me show you an example. Like, if you look at his paintings from at like this distance, it doesn't really make sense. It's just like a bunch of brushstrokes and your mind cannot really process like what's going on. But if you zoom out, it's then that your mind starts to connect the dots and the puzzle starts to solve itself. But up close, it doesn't really make sense. And it's kind of John Singer Sargent's teacher was Duran, and he kind of put a twist on the academic teachings that they all used to have in those days. And they kind of fixated on the idea of like not concentrating too much on every minute detail, but instead focusing closely on the value relationships that exist on the subject that they're drawing. So if you see any realism artists, like, they focus on every minute hair strand, and with John Singer Sargent, it wasn't really the case. Like, as you can see in these drawings, he really kind of went down that route of impressionistic realism, if that makes sense. So even in his drawings, you can see that he really had that painterly approach, and he kind of just had loose drawings. And I used to think that he just made those only, but then I saw his other stuff in a museum site and I just noticed like he can render really realistic stuff as well. But anyways, why I think that you should make copies of whatever people or artists that you admire is the fact that you will get an insight into how they use their own materials and what was the thought process behind what they were doing at that time. And it's really good for a change. Like, you can get stuck in your own little workflow for so long without even exploring what other possibilities might exist, and the possibilities might even fit into your own current workflow, which is incredible. As like, even in my case, like, I have a really angular approach to my drawing, so I am at first really generic with each shape that I'm making and then kind of tighten it up. And while making these copies of John Singer Sargent, I realized many things. Like, the first thing that I noticed was that I was using my mechanical pencils way too early in my drawings, which is not good all the time. Like, you always have some exceptions, but really it's not a good idea to like jump in with the mechanical pencils, as details are not what make the person look like that person. Like, if you can notice your friend from a mile away, trust me, it's not in the eyelashes. Like, you are just familiar to seeing that shape language that exists on their head, and that's how you realize that, oh, that's my friend. Like, you can see many painters kind of take a step back from their canvases and just try to compare what they have on the canvas to what they're seeing. And they do that because they want to make sure that the painting that they're making is still relatable to whatever they're seeing on the subject. So the value relationships are all correct and the shapes are all in the right place. And the second thing that I would say is that making copies of whatever artists you admire, it kind of helps you to get used to the way that they're using their tools, if that makes sense. So if you look up John Singer Sargent's drawing, you can kind of deduce a couple of things right off the bat. So the first thing is that he probably used to use a lot of hard pencils, and hard pencils and soft pencils. Soft pencils are really dark in value and hard pencils are really close to being white. So if you use a 2H pencil, you'll know what I mean. And this is just a speculation, by the way. Like, there's absolutely no way for me to tell exactly what he used. Like, it could be a 4B pencil, for crying out loud, applied with like the tiniest amount of pressure. And he's also using charcoal for the dark areas. It's not graphite because he's putting down highlights in a really interesting way, and with graphite it's really hard to put down highlights, especially if you're going dark with like a 10B or 12B pencils. And also in the past, his prime focus was mainly on the person's face. So if you look at any other part, he doesn't want the viewer's eye to go there, so he really simplified it, and for that he used to hold his pencil at an angle, so it really made his job easier and it was way faster. Like, I think he used to make these portraits in like less than 3 hours. And the third thing that I noticed is like, there is no overcomplication of the tools that are being used. So if you look up his work on any museum online sites, you will notice, and they will write it down, like what tools he used, like blending stumps, or like John Singer Sargent even actually used bread as an eraser. Like, that's insane. Bread as an eraser to take the grain of the charcoal. Like, I gotta try it, but I honestly don't know if that's just crazy or genius without trying it. But like again, Joe Rogan kind of said something like these two entities are like next door neighbors and they borrow sugar from each other, so you can never really tell. But you see what I'm trying to say here, right? It's not in the tools. Like obviously it matters, but they cannot keep you from making great artwork. And I think with time we're just getting more innovative with the tools, and we have like kneadable eraser now, or like Tombow Mono Zero, or like a dozen different kinds of erasers. And I just think like it's more about using the tools that you already have in your arsenal, and just trying to understand how to use them in the best way. Oh my god, that's a big yawn. I hope this video helped you out, and I will see you next week.